I used to believe that if you worked hard, loved deeply, and stayed loyal, the universe would reward you. That's what my mother always told me. Good things come to good people, Allah, she'd whisper, even when life kicked her down. I carried that belief with me like a fragile heirloom. But the day my world collapsed, I realized just how naive I had been. My name is Ala Pashchuk. I was the loyal wife of a respected businessman. A woman with a good reputation, a stable job, a teenage daughter I adored. People envied me. They thought I had it all. But what they didn't see was the rot under the surface, the secrets that crept like mold through the walls of my perfect life. Matvey, my husband, was the co-founder and face of our cleaning product empire. I was the chief accountant. We built the company from the ground up, alongside our old friend Stas. While Matvey charmed investors, I balanced the books and handled our taxes. We made a good team, on paper. That morning, Matvey left for Kiev, allegedly to meet with tax officials. We had been under investigation for weeks. Nothing dramatic, just standard audits, or so we thought. I packed his suitcase, kissed him goodbye, and watched him drive away. I felt something twist in my gut. I told myself it was stress. Back at the office, chaos was waiting. The tax inspectors were already there, swarming the place like hornets. They demanded contracts, invoices, internal memos, everything. I tried to remain calm. But when I went to the archive to pull our supplier records, they were missing. Matvey took them yesterday, my assistant Katya said with a shrug. Said he needed them for Kiev. All of them? I asked. She nodded. That didn't make sense. Why would he take the originals? We always scanned copies. Something felt wrong. I went to his office. I needed answers, or maybe I needed to prove to myself that I was just being paranoid. But when I opened the top drawer, my breath caught. A lipstick tube rolled forward, bright red. I never wore red. And then I saw a delicate pink silk scarf, tucked between folders. My heart slammed against my ribs. Not again. Matvey had always had a wandering eye. Years ago, I caught him texting another woman, but he swore it was innocent. I forgave him, for Masha's sake. For the business. But this? Lipstick and perfume in his desk? It wasn't innocent. I took a deep breath, then another. I needed to focus. Just then, Stas burst into my office, his face pale. Emergency meeting. Boardroom. Now. We gathered in silence. Stas didn't waste time. There's a mole in the company, he said. Someone's leaking data to the tax office. And they're getting paid for it. Shock rippled through the room. Eyes darted. Whispers began. I felt sick. We've already narrowed it down to the top 5 with access, he said. One of them is lying. My mind was racing. And then Irina. Irina was our rising star. Young, brilliant, and charismatic. She joined 2 years ago, and I had mentored her personally. She reminded me of myself at that age. I trusted her completely. Until now. That afternoon, she came to my office with a strange request. She needed an advance, said Matvey told her about a special discretionary fund for emergencies. My jaw clenched. Only Matvey and I knew about that fund. How do you know about that? I asked. She looked flustered. He mentioned it, casually. I stared at her. Are you sleeping with my husband? She gasped. What? No. But the flicker in her eyes, the hesitation, told me everything. Later that evening, Baba Shura, our cleaning lady who'd been with us from day one, approached me. I don't want to cause trouble, she whispered, but I've seen things. Irina, she's pregnant. The air left my lungs. Whose baby? She hesitated. Matvey's. I'm sorry. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen. My thoughts spun like a hurricane. Rage would come later. Right now, I needed facts. Strategy. I needed to survive. I stayed up all night reviewing financial records, email logs, everything. I connected the dots. Irina had been feeding information to the tax inspectors. She had access. She knew exactly what to leak to hurt us. She had motive. The next morning, I called a staff meeting. I stood at the head of the table, feeling cold and hollow. Irina has been leaking company data, I said. I have proof. She turned pale. That's a lie. I wish it were. I laid out the evidence, document trails, IP logs, financial discrepancies. The room went dead silent. Irina sobbed, then ran out. I didn't follow. Matvey didn't show up at the office that day. He called, said he was mugged. Said he needed time to recover. Coward. That night, he came home with bruises. He claimed it was a random attack. But I knew better. Someone was watching him. Someone knew about the files he took. Maybe Stas. Maybe someone else. I served him dinner, smiled, and listened to his lies. I should have kicked him out. I should have told Masha the truth. But I didn't. Why? Because you don't abandon the battlefield before the war has even started. Because I wanted justice. Because revenge, real revenge, takes patience. And I had just begun to sharpen my blade. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the lies. It was pretending. Pretending I didn't know. Pretending I could still look at my husband without picturing him with a girl half his age. Pretending that everything was normal, for Masha's sake. But even she sensed something was off. Children always do. That week was torture. Matvey avoided the office. Stas was furious. Investors were calling nonstop. The company was bleeding. And I was the one holding it together with duct tape and coffee. At night, I'd sit alone on the balcony, smoking cigarettes I had quit years ago, watching the city lights and wondering where it all went wrong. Irina disappeared. She didn't return my calls or emails. One of the secretaries claimed she saw her crying outside a private clinic. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. I had a bigger plan. Stas and I started investigating quietly. We pulled surveillance footage, tracked email activity, combed through phone logs. What we found made my skin crawl. Irina wasn't acting alone. She had help. And not just from Matvey. There was a second phone number. Multiple late-night calls. One name kept popping up, Denis Rudenko. A former logistics manager we fired 2 years ago for embezzlement. How the hell was he connected to this? We dug deeper. Denis had started a new company under a different name. A shell corporation. And guess who signed 2 supply deals with that shell company just last month? Matvey. I confronted Stas. You think Matvey's laundering money through Denis? He nodded grimly. I think we're looking at something way dirtier than infidelity. I felt nauseous. I had loved this man for 15 years. We had built an empire together. Raised a daughter. And now? He was dragging everything into the sewer. That night, I waited until Masha went to bed. Then I walked into our bedroom and calmly asked Matvey to sit. You've been cheating on me with Irina. He looked startled for half a second. Then came the performance. What? Alla, come on. That's ridiculous. She's pregnant. The color drained from his face. And you've been funneling money through a fake logistics firm tied to Denis Rudenko. He stood. Where did you get that? I leaned forward. Don't you dare insult my intelligence. Silence. And then, finally, he broke. It was just business, he muttered. The audits were getting too close. We needed a buffer. Denis had connections. And Irina? Was she just business, too? He didn't answer. I left the room. I couldn't breathe. I locked myself in the bathroom and vomited. Not from disgust. From fury. I thought I knew betrayal. I had no idea. The next morning, I made a decision. I called our attorney and transferred my shares of the company into a trust, one that excluded Matvey. I changed the locks at the office. I cut off all his access to our internal systems. Quietly. Efficiently. Then I confronted the board. I'm taking over operations, I announced. Matvey is on indefinite leave. Some resisted. Others supported me. But by the end of the day, I had the majority vote. Matvey showed up the next morning, demanding to see me. Security turned him away. I watched from the second floor as he screamed in the lobby, red-faced and furious. And I felt nothing. No sympathy. No regret. Just clarity. That same week, Irina finally resurfaced. She emailed me. One line. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. I didn't reply. Masha noticed the tension, but said nothing. She was only 14, but wise beyond her years. I found her one evening sitting quietly in her room, clutching a photo of the 3 of us at the beach, before everything shattered. Are you and Dad getting divorced? She asked. I didn't know what to say. She nodded. It's okay, Mom. I love you. That broke me. After she went to sleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened a folder Stas had given me earlier. More evidence. More corruption. Off-the-books payments, false invoices, slush funds. All leading back to Matvey. I could report him to the authorities. I should. But then what? The scandal would ruin our daughter's life. Our company's name would be dragged through the mud. Investors would pull out. Employees would lose jobs. I couldn't do that. Not yet. So I waited. Waited for the perfect moment to strike. Waited for Matvey to think he had won. Because when the truth finally came out, it would be on my terms. And everyone would know exactly who the real villain was. There's something terrifying about watching someone you once loved become a stranger. Even more terrifying is realizing they were never who you thought they were in the first place. After Matvey's tantrum in the office lobby, he stopped showing up. No calls. No emails. Just silence. For a week, it felt like peace had finally returned. But deep down, I knew better. Silence was never safety. Silence meant plotting. Stas and I kept the company afloat. We streamlined operations, renegotiated supplier contracts, started damage control with investors. We even hired a crisis PR firm. Every day was a battlefield, but I thrived in the chaos. It gave me something to focus on besides the ache in my chest. Then, just when I thought things were stabilizing, Matvey struck back. A court summons. A lawsuit. He was suing me. The man who cheated, lied, and nearly destroyed our company now claimed I had fraudulently seized control and manipulated assets for personal gain. I read the documents in stunned silence. Stas slammed his fist on the table. This is war. It got worse. Matvey had hired a private investigator. Suddenly, rumors swirled. Anonymous tips to journalists. Articles hinting at financial misconduct under my leadership. Social media trolls accusing me of sleeping my way to the top. It was character assassination. But I didn't flinch. I'd spent years living in Matvey's shadow, smiling politely while he took credit for my work. Now I was done being polite. I called my lawyer. I want a countersuit. He raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? Breach of fiduciary duty. Corporate sabotage. Defamation. He smiled. Let's go. That same week, I flew to London to see Masha. I hadn't told her everything. Not yet. But I needed her to understand why our world was falling apart. We sat at a cafe near her university. She looked older. Stronger. I know about Dad, she said, sipping her coffee. I blinked. You do? I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. I see the headlines. I've read the comments. And I know you. Tears stung my eyes. I'm proud of you, she added. For the first time in months, I let myself cry. Masha had always been the reason I stayed. Stayed in the marriage. Stayed in the company. Stayed silent. But now? She gave me permission to let go. When I returned home, Stas had more news. Matvey's frozen one of the offshore accounts. He's trying to cut off our liquidity. I laughed bitterly. He thinks money will break me. But I knew Matvey better than he thought. He wasn't doing this to win. He was doing it to punish me, to humiliate me. Because deep down, he couldn't handle losing control. So I flipped the script. We held a press conference. Cleaned house. I invited journalists to tour the office, meet the staff, see the reforms. I gave interviews. Talked about transparency, ethics, rebuilding trust. The media loved it. The woman who took down her husband, they called me. Not quite accurate, but effective. Still, the personal cost was growing. Stas and I had become close. Too close. One night, after a long meeting, we stayed late. Wine. Music. Laughter. And then a kiss. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even passionate. Just desperate. Two people clinging to each other in the wreckage of their lives. I'm not Matvey, he whispered. I know, I said. But that doesn't mean I'm ready. We didn't speak of it again. Not then. We both knew the company had to come first. Then came the breaking point. A subpoena. From the Department of Economic Crimes. Matvey had filed an official complaint, accusing me of embezzlement, tax evasion, and corporate fraud. It was all fabricated, but it was enough to trigger an investigation. My hands shook as I read the notice. Not from fear, but from rage. He wanted to ruin me completely. And he almost did. The next morning, officers arrived at the office. Boxes were seized. Computers copied. Files reviewed. Employees questioned. Some cried. Some quit. I stayed calm. I welcomed the investigators. Offered them tea. Gave them full access. Because I had nothing to hide. But I had one final move left. Stas and I went to a notary. We signed over full ownership of the company to Masha, our daughter. Legally an adult now. A British citizen. Beyond the reach of Matvey's lawsuits or the government's freezing orders. We transferred everything, shares, properties, patents. Clean. Legal. Irrevocable. The moment we walked out of the notary's office, I felt a weight lift. Stas smiled. He can't touch us now. I nodded. Let's see how he handles being powerless. That night, I sent Matvey a message. Game over. He didn't reply. But the next morning, his lawyer called mine. Matvey wanted to negotiate. I said no. Let him sit in the ruins he created. Let him taste the cold he once served me. Because now, I wasn't the loyal wife anymore. I was the woman who walked through hell and came out with fire in her veins. When you strip a man like Matvey of his power, he doesn't disappear quietly. He claws, he bites, he drags others into the dirt just to feel like he still matters. After I refused to negotiate, the threats escalated. Anonymous messages. Obscene photoshopped images of me shared in private Telegram groups. A fake scandal alleging an affair between me and a government official. Reporters began camping outside my apartment. Our employees were being harassed on their way to work. It wasn't just business now. It was personal. It was war. And then someone slashed the tires on my car. That night, I stood in the underground parking garage, staring at the rubber flaps where my tires used to be, and for the first time, I got scared. Not for myself. For Masha. She was the last good thing I had left untouched. And I knew Matvey, he'd use her if he had to. I rushed home, locked every door and window, and called her. She sounded calm. Mom, I'm fine. Nobody's followed me. I'm safe. Please, Masha, promise me stay in London. Don't come home. Not yet. She paused. Okay. I promise. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for hours. Not thinking. Just listening. Every sound from the street below made my heart jump. I was living like a hunted animal. But I wasn't prey. I was waiting. And then, fate handed me a weapon. One of our old interns reached out. Katia. A shy, quiet girl. She'd left 6 months earlier after a brief misunderstanding with Matvey. Now she wanted to talk. We met in a crowded cafe. She wore sunglasses and looked around nervously. I have something, she whispered. But I'm scared. I leaned in. You're safe here. Tell me. She slid a USB across the table. He filmed everything, she said. Meetings, conversations, threats. Even intimate moments. With Irina. With Nina. With others. I swallowed hard. How do you have this? He used to make me back up his files. My hands trembled as I took the USB. It felt like plutonium. That night, I watched everything. Matvey had been building an empire of blackmail. He recorded every liaison, every shady deal. Even conversations with tax officials, bribes he handed over, instructions he gave to frame me. And the worst part? There was footage of him coercing Irina. She wasn't just the other woman. She was a victim. The next morning, I called Stas. I have everything. He didn't ask what. He didn't need to. We end him. We assembled our legal team, submitted the files to the prosecutor's office, and sent copies to every major news outlet. By noon, #MatveyLeaks was trending on Twitter. By evening, a warrant was issued for his arrest. He ran, of course. Coward that he was. But 2 days later, they found him, hiding in a rented dacha near the Polish border. Drunk, unshaven, babbling about betrayal. Oh, the irony. As the police dragged him into custody, He screamed that I had ruined him, that I was a witch, that he'd make me pay. But there was nothing left for him to destroy. The news spread like wildfire. Corporate titan exposed in sex and blackmail scandal. Former CEO arrested on bribery and coercion charges. Ex-wife hailed as whistleblower heroine. Suddenly, I was everywhere. News shows, podcasts, women's magazines. People wanted to know my story. They called me a survivor, a warrior. Some even used the word icon. But I didn't feel like one. Not yet. Because while Matvey sat behind bars and his empire crumbled, there were still pieces of me scattered across the battlefield. I needed closure. So I went to see Irina. She was staying with her sister on the outskirts of the city, trying to heal. She opened the door with swollen eyes and a trembling smile. "You're brave," I said softly. She shook her head. "No, just broken." "You're not. You're free now. And you're not alone." We sat together on her balcony. Two women bound by a man's manipulation and by our survival. "I was so scared of you," she confessed. "Why?" "Because you had everything I didn't. Power, confidence, respect." I laughed. "You saw the mask, not the cracks underneath." For the first time, we laughed. It wasn't bitter. It was healing. A week later, I testified against Matvey in court. I walked past him, chained, gray-faced, hollow, and felt nothing. Not rage. Not satisfaction. Just peace. The trial was public. Broadcasted. People watched as the lies unraveled. Irina's statement was heartbreaking. Stas testified too. Even Katya, nervous but determined. Matvey's defense tried to paint me as vindictive, manipulative, jealous. But the evidence was undeniable. After 3 grueling days, the verdict came in. Guilty. 10 years. 10 years behind bars. And not a soul wept for him. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. No champagne. No party. Just me, the silence, and a letter from Masha. She had sent me a photo of herself in a graduation gown. And a note. "You didn't just survive, Mom. You made sure the truth lived. I love you." I pressed the photo to my chest and cried. Because finally, after everything, every betrayal, every loss, every scar, I knew who I was again. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. They say after the storm comes the calm. But no one warns you that the calm can be the most deafening silence you've ever heard. After the trial, the city moved on. The media found a new scandal. The hashtag faded. The whispers died down. And suddenly, I was just alone again. The company was technically mine now, but it felt haunted. The offices smelled like betrayal. Every desk, every hallway carried an echo of Matvey's lies. Most of the staff had either quit or distanced themselves. Stas tried to hold things together, but I could see it in his eyes. He was tired too. We had fought the war together. But rebuilding? That was my burden. I started coming in earlier, staying later, crunching numbers, rebuilding the client base, rebranding the company under a new name. I told myself it was purpose. But deep down, I knew what it really was. Distraction. From the ache. From the loneliness. From the fact that my own daughter was still in London and barely returning my calls. Masha wasn't cold, just distant. Guarded. As if she, too, wasn't sure who I had become. One night, while reviewing supplier contracts, I heard a knock at the office door. It was late. Past midnight. I opened it cautiously. Stas. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I couldn't go home," he said, stepping in. "I kept seeing Irina's face in court. The way she looked at you. Like she owed you her soul." "She doesn't," I said. "No one does." He sat across from me, poured himself a drink from the minibar. "You saved a lot of people, Alla." I stared at him. "No, Stas. I just saved myself." He nodded slowly. Then silence. Thick. Heavy. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." I braced myself. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "What's this?" "Proof," he said, "of the real reason the tax officers started snooping around in the first place." I plugged it into my laptop. Opened the file. It was a recording. Grainy surveillance footage. A boardroom. Familiar faces. And then Matvey laughing. They'll go after her first, he was saying. She signs all the financials. If anyone goes down, it'll be Alla. The men around him nodded. Joked. Toasted. And then Stas's voice calmer, lower. But why would you set up your own wife? Matvey's answer? Because I need her scared. I need her quiet. I froze. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It had been premeditated. Strategic. He'd planned to throw me to the wolves from the very beginning. I looked up at Stas. His face was tight, guilt-ridden. You knew. I found this after he left, he said quietly. I didn't know how to tell you. And I thought, maybe it wouldn't matter anymore. I wanted to scream. To hit him. To collapse. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered, thank you. Because the worst part of betrayal isn't the act, it's the doubt. The questioning. Wondering if you're just imagining the manipulation. Now I had proof. He had always planned to ruin me. I took the flash drive home that night. Sat with it in my hand for hours. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just stared at it. In the morning, I called my lawyer. Get me a financial forensic team. I want every document re-reviewed. Every report he touched. I want to clear my name completely. It took weeks. They found everything. Ghost expenses. Shell suppliers. Fake invoices. Matvey had been laundering money for years. And he'd used my signature to authorize it all. I issued a public statement. Laid it all bare. Another media storm. But this time, I wasn't a victim in their headlines. I was the woman who clawed her way out and burned the cage behind her. And then, just when I thought the past was done with me, my phone rang. It was Masha. She was crying. Mom, I need you. I dropped everything. Next flight to London. Straight to her dorm. She looked thin. Pale. Exhausted. I wrapped her in my arms. She didn't let go for a long time. What happened? I asked. Her voice cracked. I think someone's following me. I felt the old fear creep back. Have you told the police? She shook her head. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But I've seen the same man outside my classes. Near my building. Even at the grocery store. We spent the night in a hotel. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I hired a private security team. Masha protested, but I insisted. And then the truth came out. It wasn't a stalker. It was a journalist. One of Matvey's sympathizers. Digging for a new angle. He'd followed Masha across 2 countries. Looking for dirt. For proof that I wasn't the hero everyone believed I was. I pressed charges. The man was arrested. But the damage was done. Masha was traumatized. Why does he still control our lives? She cried one night. Even from prison? I had no answer. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't let it continue. So I took a leave of absence from the company. Left Stas in charge. Moved to London temporarily. Got Masha therapy. Stayed with her. Held her hand. Watched her begin to laugh again. And in the stillness of that new city, I began to heal too. One morning, walking through Hyde Park, Masha turned to me and said, "You know, you're the bravest woman I've ever known." I smiled. But deep down, I knew bravery wasn't the absence of fear. It was walking through fire with it. And we still had one part of the blaze left to face. Because Matvey, he hadn't said his last word. Not yet. Some wounds heal. Others don't. A few months had passed since I moved to London. Masha was getting stronger. Her smile came more easily. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since she was little. We would sit by the window of our small apartment, sipping tea, talking about anything but the past. But the past has a way of knocking at your door when you least expect it. I received an email. No subject. Just a name in the sender field, M.P. Matvey Pashchuk. My stomach turned. I clicked it. They made a mistake. I'm appealing. And when I'm out, we'll talk. You owe me that much. I stared at the screen. Hands trembling. He was appealing the sentence. Somehow, even behind bars, he had found a way to reach me. And I knew, deep in my bones, this wasn't over. 2 weeks later, I got the call. Matvey's appeal went through, said my lawyer. They reduced his sentence on a technicality. He'll be out in less than 4 months. I couldn't breathe. He'll be under probation, limited travel, but He'll be free. Free. The word echoed in my ears like a threat. I turned to Masha. We're going back, I said. To Ukraine. I nodded. But why? Because I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not running. If he wants a final conversation, he's going to get one. But on my terms. We flew back quietly. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Stas. I needed space. Time. I rented a small cabin outside Lviv. Far from the city. Quiet. Safe. I waited. Exactly 123 days later, he walked free. The press was there. Cameras flashing. Reporters yelling. He smirked. Waved. I watched the footage online. The same smirk he gave me the day we signed the company over to my name, pretending it was a gift, when in fact it was a trap. 2 days later, he found me. I heard the knock on the cabin door and I knew. I opened it. He looked thinner. Grayer. But those eyes still cold. Calculating. Allah, he said with a false smile. You're looking strong. I didn't invite him in. I just stood in the doorway. You said you wanted to talk. So talk. He stepped forward, leaning against the frame. You destroyed me. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. I just survived it. He chuckled. You always did have a flair for drama. And you always underestimated me. A pause. I want the company back. I laughed. Out loud. It was always mine, I said. You just ran it like a criminal enterprise. It's clean now. And you're not touching it. His eyes narrowed. Careful, Ella. You think the world still sees you as a hero? But they forget so quickly. I don't care what they see. I care what I know. And what is that? That you're nothing without power. Without control. And now you have neither. He lunged forward, grabbed my wrist. You think this is over? I'm not finished with you. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, Matvey. I'm finished with you. He didn't notice the small device in my other hand. The one that had been recording our entire conversation. I pressed stop. Sent the file to my lawyer. You just violated your probation. His face twisted. I stepped back inside. Goodbye, Matvey. 2 hours later, the police showed up. They took him away. Again. But this time, it wasn't just fraud or corruption. It was harassment. Threats. Probation breach. He wouldn't see daylight again for a long, long time. I returned to the city a week later. To my company. To my life. And for the first time in years, it felt truly mine. No ghosts. No lies. Masha eventually moved back too. She started university in Kiev. And every Friday, we'd go to dinner, just the two of us. Laughing. Free. One evening, as we walked along the river, she turned to me. Do you ever miss him? I thought for a moment. No, I said. I miss who I thought he was. But that man never existed. She nodded. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she smiled. You're the strongest woman I know. I smiled back. No, I said. I'm just a woman who refused to stay broken. The past would always be part of me. But it no longer defined me. I was no longer the wife of a criminal. No longer the betrayed. No longer the whisper in a courtroom or the scandal on a screen. I was Alla Pashchuk. Mother. Businesswoman. Survivor. And for the first time in my life, I was free.